Welcome to Eric's Perspective. Joining me today is the talented and gifted artist, Aiseborn. Aiseborn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the time. And I should point out that we're recording this in the Museum of African American Art in the Crenshaw Baldwin Hills Plaza. And we're in the room that's featuring his solo exhibit, From the Heart.
Yes.
So, Aiseborn, I think maybe that's a good starting off point. Can you tell us a little bit about what went into the title, From the Heart?
I actually went through a lot of titles in my mind over the course of making the work.
Uh-huh.
And then at some point, I started looking back at what I was making and reflecting on where it all comes from, like a deep, deep place. And that place seemed to resonate more with the heart. There was this thing about making art that I find for some of us, it depends on the state that we're in and where we are in life, or if we're making what we're making for someone else or ourselves, or how that whole creative process works is differently. But this time around, it just felt like it was really more from the heart. Even though it's not like it's never been that way, it's just as an exhibition, I thought, as a title, it would just fit.
Excellent. And I noticed in your artist statement, you said something like you weren't going to appropriate the color of your skin. I was wondering if, and the way I interpreted it in light of what you were saying about From the Heart, it's like you're not so much focused on the color of your skin, but just what's emanating from inside. Is that fair? Or?
Yeah, I think I was propelled to say that and looking for a way to word what was going on in my mind, because I feel like the way I grew up, or how I grew up as an artist, and seeing art and seeing African Americans, whether it's entertainment, movies, or sometimes you can see the person and you can know that this person's black.
Right.
But I remember learning and seeing older generations growing up, where there was a time where you didn't know if that person was black, white. And so there was this thing that at the time it was, for example, I don't know what's a good example of this, famous baseball player, Jackie Robinson.
Oh, Jackie Robinson, okay.
For example.
Yep.
I think him and his ability to be an exceptional baseball player was the most important thing. But the fact that he was black, it was an inspiration to everyone else that was the same color as him to do that, given what he had to go through. But at the end of the day, you didn't know, you would just know him as this exceptional baseball player. And I remember growing up, seeing other artists, if the artists were black, it wasn't like I was eager to know.
Yeah.
For me, it didn't really matter.
Right.
If it was good, it was good. And if I found out that person was black, or this inventor was black, then it was like, wow. But it was never like, wow. Like if I knew the person was black in the beginning, it wasn't really a wow thing.
I understand. Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't the thing that was most, like you were saying, if you looked at, let's say, a painting that's abstract, you would never know necessarily, or even a painting that's figurative either, for that matter, unless you just knew the style of the artist. You wouldn't immediately know that was an African-American artist that produced it, right?
Yeah.
You were just looking at it from an artistic standpoint and how it appealed to you and so forth.
But to discover that they were, then that was just like, oh, like that's a big inspiration. I think it rubbed off on a lot of us like that, but I just felt like there was a time culturally where, as African Americans, we were really more focused on being seen for what it is our talents were and our greatness is, versus what our skin is. I think now it feels like it's more political thing. Like people want you to know that, hey, I'm an African American doing this. I'm a black person doing this.
I see.
When before it was just like, I don't want to be judged by the color of the skin.
Okay.
Now it feels like there's this intertwining thing of judgment and, look, I can do this.
I see. I get, and so now I'm kind of putting it together. It sounds like you just want to be seen as an artist who is producing the work that you're inspired to produce, and not necessarily focus on the fact that you were black. It could be like after the fact acknowledgement, but not an upfront thing.
Yeah, because honestly, there's this is 2023.
Yeah.
Not only do you have a lot of black artists that paint black art, but you have a lot of white artists that paint black art too.
And by that, you mean subject matter that's black.
Yeah, the subject matter is black.
Yeah.
So does that make them
And that's the question. So how do you define what a black artist is, right?
So
yeah.
That's the thing I think that I ended up pondering at some point.
Yeah.
Kind of noticing, it's like, well, there is this focus that is important, but at the same time, individually, we just take it in differently and we put it out in a different way.
I understand. And my understanding, too, is just in general, if you wind back the clock, a lot of times, a lot of that comes from, like you took the example of Jackie Robinson, and there were so many, he played in the Negro baseball leagues and stuff like that, and he was a star there. But there were other stars, too, that were talented as well, but just weren't allowed to play professional Major League Baseball. And then finally, Jackie Robinson breaks the barrier. Yeah. And it wasn't because of their talent. It was just because of their skin. So I think what that generated was, just historically speaking, is this desire to say, hey, you know what? Just because I'm black doesn't mean I can't be good at what I'm doing. And I think a lot of times when, in my experience anyway, just thinking about my own father, his generation, and even members of my own generation, it's almost like saying, hey, listen, I don't conform to the racist idea that just because I'm black, I'm not capable of these great achievements, regardless of what it is, business, entertainment, arts, science, teaching, you name it. And so anyway, I appreciate where you're coming from on that. But, and I noticed too, the way the heart is spelled, From the Heart is the title, but you're capitalizing the word art within the heart. So it's capital H-E and then capital A-R-T. Is that right?
Yes, it was, I guess, trying to be creative.
I like that though, because you're kind of connecting the two.
Yeah.
The heart and art all together. I like it just in the
I think most people see it. When they see the word, they see it there.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes it's invisible at the same time.
Oh no! Hey, listen, isn't that the case with a lot of things? It's right in front of you. Sometimes you can't. You're not ready to see whatever it is, or not able.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the art as we're surrounded by it in this room. It's very fabulous, and it shows a diversity of subject matter and technique and materials and so forth. I just want to start by asking: is there a favorite material that you like to use? By the way, is there? Some artists will tell me that watercolors is one of the things they like, although they work in different media. Some say there's no favorite. How do you come out?
It reminds me of a few people I know that there's a running joke that goes around, or used to go around, but it's still kind of there. But the joke is that my favorite medium to use is spray paint.
Ah, okay.
To some degree, it's true. It's definitely the most challenging medium, I think.
I would think so, right? Because I'm always amazed to see how much detail is achieved by artists. Spray, because it's not as much control, right, as with a brush or something like that, right?
You learn how to control. You learn the control. And it's body movement. It's awareness around the science of what's happening when the paint leaves the can, because there's this air in the middle of the surface and you. There's this space in between. What's happening in between that space, between you and the wall or the surface, is the quantum thing that it's going to get reflected once it hits the surface.
Yes.
It's a magical thing. Every moment, each one of those moments is a magical moment. Just from pressing that nozzle and that paint that theoretically it's turned into a gas, but if it hits the surface, it's a remarkable thing that comes out of that. And those who have mastered it or become really high level at it, I mean, it's just remarkable what they can do.
I know, I've seen examples, and it just floors me to see. I have to ask, there's a piece in this, a few pieces actually in this exhibition of ducks. Were they done with the can? Or it kind of has that kind of look maybe?
Yeah, the ducks were spray painted. There's some brush strokes in the background with the ducks, but the ducks themselves were spray painted.
It's awesome to see. It kind of gives it a nice sort of, not texture necessarily, but kind of a feel, almost like a veil or something. It's like you're looking through a veil where you can see the detail, but it's not sharp detail. It's just kind of soft. It softens it.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Yeah, I think spray paint gives, which kind of you see it with airbrush, which airbrush and spray paint are similar just because you're dealing with the paint spraying out onto the surface.
Yes.
The different sizes of the lines and whatnot. But what's cool about spray paint, I guess, is the different textures that exist within just painting or any medium or art medium, and getting that to sort of be reflected in the art piece that's done with spray paint. Because there's different looks with spray paint that a lot of artists want to achieve. And sometimes it's, it could be outer space. How can I do outer space with spray paint? Or how can I paint, the chrome on the car, like all these different effects and looks.
Oh, yeah.
You can pull off with spray paint.
It's amazing, by the way, you're able to pull those off with spray paint. I'm just really floored by that whole process there. And is it any special kind of spray paint that you use, or does it really matter? And do you have to put your own nozzle on there, or you just use the nozzle that comes with it?
Honestly, I have to say this part because I don't want there to be a misconception here. The paint that is made now today, as far as spray paint goes, is advanced compared to what spray paint was maybe 20 years ago. The way that it is now and the science of it, you have different brands and different what do you call that, pigments that are mixed together that they can use now that are just, I guess, makes it easier to learn how to use the medium. But spray painting in general is just a hard thing. And I remember when there wasn't that many versions of spray cans. Like now you have like 4, 5, 6 different brands of spray paint that you can choose from with over 50 different colors.
Wow. Yeah.
And some of the guys I know and looked up to growing up, they only had like 10, 15 colors to pick from.
Wow. So what they were able to achieve is even more remarkable because they had limited options.
Right.
Yeah.
At that time, you didn't have 15 different nozzles you could interchange on the can.
Yeah.
those guys either had to make it or figure out how to release pressure to do all these different things with the can. So the movement and learning what it was going to do when it came out the can was critical at one point, and leading up to the paint they make now that's available, I mean, it just made those guys that much better.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
So there's this weird thing that I think throws people off because they can see someone using it, and it's the person using it is making it look so easy, but the minute you go try to do it,
You can't duplicate it.
it's tough.
Yeah.
And then not knowing that, oh, this person has been messing with this stuff since the beginning of time.
Yeah. And practiced and trial and error and so forth to get to where they were.
Yeah.
Right? Well, then that actually, so I'm going to come back to this exhibit because I'd like to talk about more pieces up, but I want to ask, is that how you got started as an artist? Was through spray painting? Or was it just in a general way? You just got involved in all different types of media at the same time?
I think generally speaking, I was just always in art.
Just as a general thing?
Yeah, and it was something I always gravitated towards.
So about how old would you say you were when you first started doing any kind of experimentation, or however you want to characterize producing art in one way or another?
At least 9.
No.
At least 9. Yeah.
And by the way, were you born here in L.A.?
Yes.
Okay, so you're L.A. native. Everybody should recognize that.
Born and raised.
Yeah, excellent. And so coming up, who were some of your major influences? You talked about some of the folks that you noticed with the spray can, and I'm realizing those are some, but are there any other people that were instrumental in your development as an artist?
In the development,
Or even inspiration, not necessarily instruction, but somebody whose work you admired, you just said.
It's interesting because I feel like when I really had this, what would you call that?
Artistic impulse, maybe, or
yeah, or when you're discovering something, it's new to you for the first time.
Yes, yeah.
So in that stage, it was, comic books. It was whatever TV shows are playing, drawing those characters or characters from the comic books, and then having a transition at some point where I started drawing from magazines, actual faces and people. During that time, for me there was no sense of anyone to really look up to, if that makes any sense.
I understand.
It was more like looking up to whoever drew that Spider-Man, or whoever drew that Batman or Superman, those characters. It was whoever drew those characters were the inspiration.
I understand, yeah.
So that, like Tom McFarlane, for example, that's to see those characters of Spawn and all, that was the thing, And then at some point, I think when I got into, the older I got, the more I started to learn about other things that were art related, and then that would kind of grow my interest. But getting into graffiti art, I think that really just kind of took my mind somewhere else, only because it just looked like so much fun. It was just so much fun, and it was, I guess it was challenging in some way, but seeing it out and about in the street, something was just exciting about that, seeing these big old productions and murals too, because LA also it has a big mural culture, so it's also known for that.
And you've done murals, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell the audience where they might see those murals?
There are a few of them around. There's a few in the South Central area. There's maybe one in the Mid-City area.
Okay.
There's one in West Adams area, downtown LA. I know at one point when you were interviewing Keisha, I heard her mention the Kobe. So that's downtown.
Ah, okay.
There's a Nipsey Hussle down there too.
Okay.
But the other ones, there are a few of them that might be, how do I say this? Some of them are more like enlightenment, and the other ones there's a few that might be political, but it's only like one or two of them. And then there are some that I think they might still be around or they might not be around.
Oh, okay. But you've done several over the years then. Yeah. Excellent. And the materials promoting this exhibit here at the museum say this is your first solo exhibit. Is that right?
It's the first solo exhibit for me with the museum.
With the museum. Okay. But you've had shows at galleries and other places.
The first time I had a solo exhibit was with a space called the Container Yard.
Is that here in Los Angeles?
Yeah, it's here in Los Angeles. The Container Yard, great group of people.
Excellent.
Over the years, they've been very supportive to a lot of us artists, and over the years they've opened their spaces and their doors to artists to paint and do different things. And they had a few different event spaces and stuff.
So they held the exhibitions and showed the artists that they were supporting at the time,
Yeah.
including you.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Those kinds of things are so important. It's so good to call them out because I'm imagining, is this like a commercial gallery or?
Well, so that was
or like a
they
collective or something?
They had event space.
Okay.
They had space they would use for events, things like that. Along with, at the time, their property was also like an historic property.
Oh.
Because of the history of the place and what came through there and the inventions that came through there.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting story behind it in itself.
That sounds so interesting to me just because it's like almost like a history of a place where creative people came together. In that case, maybe just creating these new inventions, but in your case, the art that's being created.
And the Container Yard, they're located in the Arts District.
Okay.
So you could just imagine that not only were they in communication with artists like me and other artists from different parts of the world too.
Oh yeah.
They would come
Not just
down
California.
They would come down and do stuff. And I mean, they're in the Arts District too, so why not?
Right.
Why not create this little oasis?
Seems perfect.
And in the process of all that, I had been creating this body of work with the intention to do a show, and they opened the space up for that. And I think there's a lot of spaces out there like that are willing to do things like that.
And that's a big gamble, right? I mean, that's such like I said, an important function for artists to have that space available.
It's tricky only because it's not like, you don't get that gallery label. Kind of thing. Like, I had an exhibition at this gallery.
Right.
It's that, I don't know, it's good.
But it's still exposure though, right?
Yeah, it's just interesting, I think, when being an artist and if you have this mentality of relying on that to be the thing, it could be and it could limit you sometime.
Ah.
So in this particular scenario, I felt the gratefulness and like, oh, like this is cool. Like this will be cool. It doesn't have to be like this very specific kind of gallery or space. Like these people already enjoy and love art and support artists. So why not?
Yeah, sure. It sounds like a very fertile ground to develop, I guess, or to at least show and so forth.
Yeah, and that was around 2016, I believe.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. And I think leading into pandemic, or during pandemic, I think going through the stuff I was dealing with, and everyone's dealing with something during, or has been dealing with something during these last 3 years, I feel like. But I remember someone saying to me, actually, I'll tell you who said this too, which is crazy because he's like the person that would think like this. Patrick Henry Johnson, you familiar with Patrick?
I don't think I'm familiar with him, no.
Patrick, he was responsible for the mural right here on Crenshaw.
Okay.
The woman she's like the galaxy. You can see inside. She's the galaxy.
Okay.
She's the universe. It's like a portrait. It's a big afro.
Yes.
He's like, Ace, in time, people are going to be looking back, and when they reflect on this time, one of the things that will come up is what kind of art people were making during this time. And that made me think back to how many times you look in an art history book or a history book, and it's like, oh yeah, this art was made during this time.
Right.
And sometimes we attach the art to that time period because that's how we mark time,
Sure. Yeah. Like at this museum, we were talking to Keisha about Palmer Hayden. He's associated with the Harlem Renaissance. And so you got all these artists that were active during that time and their production at that particular time, and look back on now is seen in that context of the Harlem Renaissance, for example. Yeah, it's a valid point. Yeah, so as I'm looking around, going back to what is on the walls now and part of this show From the Heart at the museum in Crenshaw, Baldwin Hills Plaza, I noticed you did a piece. I'm guessing this is a portrait of Noni Olabisi.
Yes, Noni.
Noni Olabisi. So I know she was an artist as well. What was the inspiration for that piece?
Well, I didn't know Noni, and I remember when I first met Noni, and over the years, seeing Noni, helping Noni, I've always been honored to know her because I feel as an artist, it's when you dedicate yourself to like putting a message out there or inspiring people in a certain way,
mm-hmm.
and then the way you're doing it, it's political in the same sense, and it's sensitive subject matter. I feel like you deal with a lot.
Yeah.
And Noni, the murals she's created around LA and has worked on, I feel like they're very powerful murals.
Yeah.
And if you grow up in a neighborhood where those murals are, you know what's there. They almost become landmarks.
So you grew up in a neighborhood where her mural, or at least one of her murals, was located?
Passing by.
Passing by, yeah.
It
was easy for you to have seen it.
Yeah, I feel like growing up, I passed by all the. It's like Kent Twitchell. Like, I mean, if you going down the freeway, like, it's very hard to miss.
To not see it, right?
Yeah. So it felt like growing up, it was kind of like that. And then meeting her in person just adds to it all.
Of course.
But the way she responded to me was always interesting. I felt like.
What do you mean? How did she respond?
There's a few people that do this, and I don't know. Like, I'm always excited, like, to meet talented artists.
Sure.
Sometimes it's actually pretty humbling. It kind of puts me in a different headspace because I'm like, whoa, like, that's so and so though, you did this, and like, but I guess her and us other artists, they've just felt like I was this like special thing.
Oh, so
And
she made you feel special. You were maybe thinking of her in this special way, but she was also thinking back at you in a special way too. Is that fair to say?
yeah. And so it would like it was
That's kind of a cool thing, right? You wouldn't expect it.
It's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's like, man, I should be acting the way you're acting. Like you're all ecstatic. I should be ecstatic too.
So it was kind of pressure in a way then maybe.
Yeah, it made me, or it reminded me of, and sometimes it just happens that way, but growing up, if you can do something and that other people can't do, if they wish they could do it, and they're telling you this. And
so that's what she was saying to you? She was aware of what you were doing, and she was saying, I wish I could have gone in that direction?
Or not necessarily that, but just more like, you keep going.
She was encouraging.
Yeah.
And we should say she not too long ago passed away.
Well, it was also like, it was this, I don't know, it was always a tricky thing because sometimes, like, if it's, especially an artist that, you grow up under, like, you kind of feel like how are they asking me for pointers?
Oh, right. And she kind of surprised you by asking you that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot of stuff from her, too.
Yeah.
Small things that I remember. I'm reminded of, like, especially being a muralist. So I've talked to her about some of the murals, but she naturally talks to me about this stuff, too. Like, what it was like, what's it like now compared to then, and having to restore murals, and what to do to save trouble later on if you have to restore the mural, all this.
Well, it's funny. So I talked to a mural artist who was telling me that as a final step, they would coat it with something that in case somebody spray painted over top of it, they could more easily remove it without damaging the mural itself. Is that the kind of thing you were talking about, or maybe something else?
Yeah, it exists.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it lasts.
Oh, that's another good question, right? How long will it last?
Yeah, how long it lasts. Because even with murals, we deal with the aging process a lot more.
Yeah.
We watch it age.
Sure. I mean, it's subjected to the weather, intense sun, and maybe rain, and God knows what else, right?
Yeah, so those are the things we think about, and as time passes and you have the opportunity or the chance to touch it up, you can kind of you can see what was going on then and now and what to do to improve a certain area, make it last longer, because I think when I was helping Noni, and wasn't even involved in the painting process of it, but just helping set up scaffolding and get supplies together. Like, and I didn't think about it then because, we're just in the moment. But you get to a certain point and, I feel like once you get to a certain age and you're dealing with public art, the thought changes into, okay, there might not be a second go around at fixing this.
Ah, you mean because of your age, you might be
Yeah.
not around anymore. You might have passed away, and then there's the piece that's left.
Yeah. So whatever
in the
you
wake.
do now is what
It's got to be meant to last, so to speak.
Yeah. But the first time you're doing it might not be like that.
Right, you're not thinking along those lines.
Yeah. You're like, I'll come back and
And touch it up if I need to, no problem. Right. So were you literally, I mean, you were talking about helping. So were you helping her not just set up the scaffolding, were you contributing artistically too to any of the murals? Or
not the murals necessarily. I was working with one of the city facilities at the time, William Grant Still Art Center, doing a lot of stuff there over the years. And sometimes me and her would end up working on some of the exhibits.
I see.
Together. And her artwork would also be in the exhibits too sometime.
Okay.
So I got to sit, have conversations with her.
What a great opportunity though to be
learn she's
stuff.
really like picky about falafels.
Really? No kidding.
Like, oh, this is a good falafel. And she'd come back and be like, nah, that wasn't it.
I love it. I love it. And by the way, I love the portrait as I look at it. It's big for one thing, so the scale is incredible. It's very intimate though, because it's only her head mostly, right? I mean, there's a little bit of her shoulder in there.
Well, it's done with spray paint.
And it's done with spray paint. I mean, that's even more remarkable because you get all the shading and everything, of the three-dimensionality of, you're on a two-dimensional surface and you get some three-dimensional things.
If it was any smaller, it would have been a little tougher.
I see what you mean. I could see that because the spray, I guess it kind of fans out as it's being sprayed, correct? Or
yeah,
you can't get too fine.
It's possible, but I mean, if I got brushes and acrylic paint, the smaller it gets, the question becomes, okay, am I just challenging myself here, or can I just really just pick up the brush and just paint it with, acrylic paint or oils or whatever?
Yes.
Just spraying it.
Yes.
At the time, I wasn't sure if I was going to do it at the time. I had been kind of looking at like different pictures.
I see.
And then I think I looked at what colors I had, and there were some yellows there.
Uh-huh.
So there was this thing that she would do that was kind of a signature thing that would happen, where she would do this yellow dot in the middle of the forehead.
Oh, yeah, and I kind of see you've got the yellow on her forehead in the portrait of her.
And then there's the blue, which there's a good amount of paintings where the figures were blue. And then there was still like the yellow dot thing.
I see. And that accounts for the fact that the portrait of her is blue, or shades of blue.
She had quite a few works that were black and white, but then there was the thing with the blue, that every time if you saw them in blue, it was like, oh, it was like a refreshing thing.
Oh, yeah.
But that was kind of what inspired me to just move in that direction. And looking at the colors I had, I said, all right, this might be the thing that works for this. Like, I'll do this. Because the ducks were already done.
I see.
The ducks were already done.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
And by the way, any particular reason you chose ducks? Do you like them as a subject matter? They're kind of funny to watch for me. I was with my daughter not long ago, and we walked by this pond. There were some ducks in it. They're kind of fun to watch, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, they're fun to watch, and that to me was making fun amongst all the other works that were taking place.
I see.
The ducks just had a different feel. They were going to go somewhere else, but in the process of everything, over time, they ended up just being a part of this show. And
Well, I'm glad they are, though, because I mean, they're a lot different in subject matter, obviously, than most of the things that are in here. But I think that's one reason that I'm glad they're in it. And it also shows your spray painting ability at the same time. I mean, it's remarkable to see them, the way you've portrayed them. I think it's very nice.
They had an effect. There was like this shiny kind of like glass effect that I wanted to pull off with them. And so for me, it gave me a refreshing way of like doing something different and still being able to like work with the spray paint at the same time.
Yes.
I feel as if I might have spray painted more portraits and floral stuff than ducks, but it was different this time around. I felt like it was just refreshing to do.
Excellent.
Funny though at the same time.
Excellent. I really like them. My eye is drawn to them. There's another piece in here. I think it's the only. I could be wrong, but it could be the only multiple. There's a piece you collaborated with another artist that's hanging. Is that like a color lithograph?
There's two. There's two actually.
There's two. And are both a collaboration, or is it just the one that I'm thinking about?
Both are collabs. Well, one is a seriograph.
Seriograph, okay.
And the other one is a collage.
Okay.
Seriograph is a collaboration with Chaz Bojarquez.
Okay.
He's a master of lettering.
Oh.
He's like the godfather of graffiti per se, and he he mastered cholo writing. Like,
no kidding.
He's the man. Like he's a big influence on a lot of people like me.
And how did you come to be aware of him?
Well, growing up and having an interest in graffiti and writing, because the root of it, like there's street art, but then there's this graffiti thing, and they're at the heart of it all. It's writing.
You mean graffiti itself is writing? Is that what you mean?
It's right. Like if you look at the definition of what graffiti is, that's not necessarily the art form, right?
Right.
Because
I think a lot of people think of it in a negative way, where it's just kind of random lines that are spray painted and maybe symbols or some kind.
Yeah, but take away the name and just picture all these guys who are really talented and good at writing. Just writing.
Like lettering, you mean?
Yeah, lettering.
Yeah.
Just sitting there and being able to, you could write a love letter and just give it to one of us, and we can write that whole thing over and make it look like something
that's really beautiful, huh?
Has more, like that just does something more.
Yeah.
And that in it, lettering, and that's an art form in itself, but it's turned into this other thing. And we had the pleasure of working with the Getty, and they revealed some things to us that made it more aware for us to see how the guys in the 1600s, 1700s, 1500s, all throughout time, have been mastering letters, and artists working with letters.
No kidding. So,
and all the different alphabets.
Wow. And when you say us, do you mean you and Chaz, or you and a bunch of other people besides the two of you?
It's bigger than the two of us.
Yeah. So, I mean, when the Getty, they invited a bunch of folks to, I think that's great.
It was a bunch of folks involved in that. But they have an archive of books that show a lot of these different things, symbols, stuff that's just based on alchemy.
How cool of them to make that available. It must have been cool for you as an eye-opener to realize that this kind of thing's been going on for centuries.
Yeah, and we're just in a different paradigm with it.
Yeah,
A totally different space with it.
yeah,
I think I don't know, when the art form began, there was a lot of positive, intentions, I think.
mm-hmm.
The intentions were more positive than negative. But like anything out there, within a society, if society doesn't understand it, it's like, well, what is that?
Right. And sometimes the reaction is even more extreme.
Yeah, we don't understand what that is.
Yeah, and a negative reaction ensues or whatever. Yeah.
But over time, I think people have discovered that there's a lot of structure to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of integrity involved around it.
Yeah.
I mean, like anything, I think you can break it down and, make it look like something other than what it really is. But
Mm-hmm.
at the heart and the core of it, there's a lot of structure and there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for here? Balance.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of knowledge around the forms
Right.
that are involved.
Yeah.
And some of the people that I've looked up to that've done it and that I know, like they're applying a lot of information. And you sit there and you think that if you, and I see it like any language, if you don't know the language, then of course it's foreign to you.
Right.
I think
You might jump to conclusions that are not even justified.
Yeah. I think writing graffiti art is the same way.
Yeah. And I noticed, by the way, that a part of this exhibit, you had mentioned earlier about getting your brushes out and so forth. The part of the exhibit is actually some of your brushes and the trays and cups and things that were used to contain the paint. Do you, by the way, so those will be acrylic paints, I'm imagining that you used in those?
Yeah.
And do you just apply the paint, or do you actually mix it in the container and to get another color that you maybe didn't think about before? I was just curious about your method. Just looking at the containers, it's like the colors sometimes are all mixed in.
Yeah, it's mixing the paint. And it's maybe more now than I used to. I mix a lot more paint.
Oh, okay.
I have this, I don't know, there's a few rules up there in my head, but one of them has to do with not using the color directly out of
the tube.
Yeah, like mix it with another color or something.
And so one of the things about many of these pieces that are in this exhibit, for one thing, a common thing on a lot of them are like gigantic circles. I kind of like that idea just in general. It mimics the planet that we're on. It's kind of, to me, it means a little bit about the circle of life. I'm not sure how you intended it. Is there any special meaning behind the use of the circles, for example? You have in so many of these pieces.
The circles have been an ongoing thing for a while. The circle of life, flower of life, it's very relevant. The thing I think I was gravitated towards the most was the patterns, or just the ornateness, the fleur-de-lis kind of designs.
Ah, yes.
And I think at some point, or I know that there was a point in time where I was kind of drawing these circles behind like the figures I would draw, and then start doing all these fancy things inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I thought I was doing something different. And as my research kind of grew, or my studies grew, discovered that there was this common thing all over the world, that I had to deal with some kind of higher way of perceiving the universe and where we are in it.
Yeah.
And it went beyond the halo, I guess.
Not limited to just the idea of a halo, but it's beyond that.
Yeah. Because at some point it was like, oh, decorating the halo, I'm doing fancy stuff.
Yes.
Then someone would see what I would be doing and bring up the fact that, oh, do you know about this artist? And then seeing a few artists that would do it, or having that knowledge, and over time I was reminded of something I was told as a young child, that nothing is new under the sun. And to be told, especially as a young artist, I think that, nothing's new under the sun, and you're over here trying to figure out how to create something that no one else is doing.
Right, seems to be a contradiction.
It's a hard thing to have to deal with. But through the discovery of what I thought I was doing different, which somewhere down the line it does end up being different. But yeah, there's other artists that did stuff similar, and there are similarities around the world with other cultures, whether it comes through their textile works or their temples, different architecture, or if you see it within just other artists,
yes,
whether alive or living, I would notice it. And after having to go back and think about the idea, oh, there's nothing new under the sun, then I had to just kind of make the decision to just keep going and doing what I'm doing, or just quit.
Well, it sounds like you took that saying and as a challenge, basically, to make you reach for perhaps something that has never been done before. And as I look around, by the way, I look at these circles and the way you've done them, the incredible attention to detail, which is extremely very nice, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you.
I think you've achieved that. I mean, let's just say that the use of circles as symbols and as items of design or whatever has been around, but the way you do it, to me, is really unique and very interesting, and it seems like just infused with, not just talent, I want to say, but feeling. I think you've done quite a job in taking it to another level, in my opinion.
Oh, thank you. What I will say, I think that might help a lot of people in understanding what they're seeing inside the circle and these ornate kind of patterns.
Yes.
It's somewhat this special technique that I have that's based off how plants grow and the foliage and the leafing of the plants.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of relativeness to nature involved. As I'm making these circles and doing the patterns are evolving from these single strokes. So there's this single stroke technique I kind of have. It kind of revolves around one stroke painting. So being able to make one stroke and then move on to the next stroke and keep using these one strokes to then create this bigger picture or bigger pattern.
Yes.
And with the circles, I could pick any shape, but the circle is the one that's universal shape. Presenting the designs within the circle as a pattern to demonstrate this technique is always seem to be fitting for the viewer versus if I just take a square canvas and I just paint all the designs in it. A lot of people would love it, I think, but also there's an abstraction that happens.
Right.
And with the shape, circle, square, if it's in a contained shape with this consistent pattern, it gives people something else.
Well, I've read where our brains really crave order, and maybe it's satisfying that aspect that all of us maybe possess, where it helps to organize everything and unify them, perhaps.
Yeah, there's this, it's funny you say that. There's this book. I don't read a lot of books. I don't, but the stuff I do read and pick up on, it usually hits me like hard. And sometimes I find stuff and it's like, oh, like this was meant for me to like look at, like.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this book. It's like, I don't know. It's like the size of it's a
It's
big
thick.
book.
Yeah.
It's a big book, but it's about order and chaos, and it's all based on patterns and patterns that literally like are based on decor, like this decor thing.
Sure.
But how you can look at a pattern and the pattern shows you the order.
Yeah.
But then you see the chaos, and the chaos is kind of like the transition of it going into another set of orders.
Yeah.
And it's a joke. It's a kind of a geometry thing going on at the same time.
Yeah.
But with the book and with my mind, which at the same time created this validation of what was going on in my mind.
Yeah.
Because naturally you can see the beauty in things.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or bad. But the approach and what how deeply you understand that and respond to it is what you have to deal. You have to deal with that personally.
Yeah.
Being an artist, I have that kind of vision. Sometimes it's not good. It's not good. Sometimes it's not good. I just say that because in the real world, I guess it's not the real world, but in the real world, there's a thing happening where, like an owl, right? They can turn his head 360. He can see everything,
Right.
but there's not much he can really do about it.
Yeah. Which may be frustrating at the same time, right? When you were talking about that, somebody once told me, I don't know if it's true or not, but they say if you go to the New York Library, the main library in New York City, on either side of the steps leading into the facility are lions, and in Chinese culture, they signify paradox and confusion, with the idea being before you walk into the library, as you're walking in, you have to go through paradox and confusion before you attain this level of understanding and knowledge. I just thought it reminded me when you were describing the space, being a little chaos, and all of a sudden it leads to the order. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of that in a way.
And some of the patterns, like they do that. The patterns, I don't put a lot of. It might seem like I do, and I mean to an extent I do. But making everything or every single piece of the pattern identical to the last portion of the pattern is not always my focus.
Sure.
My focus is more so the entire thing and how the entire thing comes together.
Yes.
And how that pattern lives with the outside pattern and the inside pattern. How they all intertwine together.
Yes.
And if there is some sort of locking or continuum, that continuum can shift into a different pattern.
Well, I wanted to point out that I might have mentioned it before, you did this wonderful tribute mural, basically, of Samela Lewis. And the interesting thing was when we were talking before this recording began, you were mentioning how it wasn't quite finished yet. And that's the sort of the spirit of that saying that she has, where it's not finished yet. I was just wondering, that's almost like a common artistic thing. Sometimes you're almost never finished with a piece, really, when you walk away from it. Is that accurate? By the way, and what was it like? I'm throwing two questions at the same time, but what was it like being asked to do that? That must have been an honor, I'm guessing.
Well, to answer the question, I guess I wanted to do it. I don't know if I was asked to do it.
Oh, that's even better. The initiative came from you.
Yeah, I'm in a space that she's responsible for.
Yeah.
And there's a handful of artists, and maybe even more, that I can count, that are not with us today that I probably have met. And it's scary to think in the future that will probably continue to happen, whether it's others or if it's me in relationship to someone else having to be like, oh, I knew this.
Right.
But it's just the heritage, that's here. I've worked in other places and been around the culture to see the importance of people who came before me. Sure. And it was hard to be in this space and, okay, I can do this. And many times as I've done it, to not do it. So
I think it's a wonderful thing on multiple levels. I mean, the piece itself to me is very attractive and interesting, and I really like what you did and your interpretation of it and so on. But at the same time, the fact that you thought to do it and to acknowledge ancestors, I guess, in a sense, I just think it's to be respectful of those who came before us is always a good thing, I think. And it's so nice that you did that. Yeah.
I had fun with it. I probably had like one little moment, but when that came up, it was like, oh yeah, that's right, she said this. And I'm like, I think the next day I came in and I'm like, hey Keisha, what was that statement she said?
Yeah.
She tells me the statement. And I'm like, I think maybe that's what this should be, versus me having this idea in my mind that, this is the end result, right? I see an end result in my head. But of course, like most art pieces, there's some sort of end result that, we're looking for some kind of result at the end, whether it's something you see, or if it's something you feel.
And would you say there's something else you think you might end up doing to it that you haven't done yet? Does it feel that way to you?
Oh, I've had the thought a few times.
Yeah, but it sounds like you've resisted the thought, though. You're gonna leave it alone, or are you gonna?
Yeah, resisted. Honestly, I can't say.
Oh, okay.
I think that's the other beauty in art that I find is that people take things in better when they're in front of it, or if they don't know that that this thing is going to be involved.
Right.
I think the way we see art now, it's like everyone wants to see it before it. It's like you
before,
want me
before it's ready to be seen.
Yeah, like you want me to paint something for you.
Yeah.
Right. So you want me to, like, oh, Ace, can you paint this?
Yeah.
I want it right here. Just, do a small mini mock-up of it and with all the colors and everything and what it's gonna look like. Right. I mean, I could show it. I could do that and show it to you, but now you're cutting into the magical thing that happens.
Right, because something could occur to you, and what you're saying is even after you've created something small, like a mock-up or whatever, something could occur to you as you're doing the piece on a larger scale on the actual surface that you didn't think of while you're doing the mock-up.
Yeah, and I feel like that happens more with like photographs and like collage stuff. But like if if it's a drawing, like a straight up drawing, like even in this show, there's 3 illustrations that are just pencil, maybe a little bit of ink and marker, but one of them is actually a drawing of a bigger canvas.
So more like a study. Is that be fair to say?
And I think the drawings, something about that state and artists that can do that. There's this other special thing that's there, but also because of the world we live in, we have crunch time and deadlines.
Deadlines, right?
So we have ways of doing things that are just faster and just help people get, see what we want to do better and create less confusion in that way. Yeah. But there's this remarkable thing and magical thing that happens with art in the moments. Like I remember, we end on this note, but I remember I was sharing studio space with a good friend. Her name's Adele, remarkable portrait artist. And I had to, I guess someone was coming by to see the painting that she had just did of them. Mm-hmm. And this is when I was reminded of this thing that's in the air, because sometimes we get in our own little world and we forget that there's these other things in the ether, like they're just floating. Right. But the lady comes in to see her portrait, and Adele's not there, right, to see so I see this lady's reaction when she first sees the portrait. Okay. And it was like, whoa, like how she, it's like amazing to see how people respond when they first see themselves, right?
What was it, positive or?
It was positive, but when the artist came back and was like, oh, so-and-so popped up, I was like, she already came.
Well, she saw it already.
Yeah, and she was just like, oh, like I wasn't here to like see, like.
Right, missed the moment.
Yeah, it's the surprise, the like, oh wow, like like when you're opening a present for the first time. Yes. And you get to see how that person responds. Like, she didn't see that, and I had a moment where I was like, that's a really crucial, like, and I felt what she felt. Right. Because she didn't get to see that.
She didn't get to experience that reaction, the first reaction. Yeah.
And it's such a magical thing.
Sure.
But in the world we are now, it's like, it's easy to forget about that small little, thing that happens in those moments. Right. But that was a reminder at that point, like, oh yeah, like there's a special thing that happens with art and the relationship that people have around it, especially when it's them and you're the artist painting them.
Sure. Yeah, I get it. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for spending the time and remind everybody that this exhibit at the Museum of African American Art will be up until April the 28th. Yes. And are there any other exhibits, by the way, do you have coming up anytime soon you want to mention?
Just this exhibit.
Okay.
I do believe we're doing another reception for the exhibition.
Okay. And we'll be sure to, do you know offhand when that will be? Otherwise, we can also tell everybody later.
It is in March.
It is in March, okay.
I think we have the date.
Okay.
I
don't want to spoil the, great. So the other thing we should point out real quick before we sign off is that there are prints that were made, right, that people can purchase. Yes. As well as, is there anything else? Oh, T-shirts.
There is some T-shirts. There's prints. There's 2 prints. There will be other ones coming soon, but the 2 prints, one is from the red series and one is from the blue series. The one in the red series is the Absolute, which is kind of like this, like, homage to like art and artistry. Mm-hmm. In the center, there's a letter A, and which is this idea of like to just inspire, to do your best kind of thing, or have some sort of inspiration. Most of the pieces are meant to be inspiring.
Well, I have to say I saw both prints. I think folks out there might be better off if they got one. And so in order to get them, they get them from here at the museum, right? Or can they get them elsewhere? Tell us, how does anybody get those prints and the T-shirts?
If you come to the museum, there is a QR code that's available.
Okay.
Here you can scan.
You could scan the QR code.
Or you could go on
to
legacywestmedia.com. And I believe there's a link there with my name attached.
And then the museum's website, too, probably. We'll maybe flash that later.
I think the museum's website might have something on it, too.
Okay.
Could link you to it.
Excellent. Well, again, I strongly recommend everybody see the show, first of all. Very talented artist. That's the most important thing, I think. But also pick up some of those prints we mentioned, and the T-shirts are really cool. And again, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I appreciate you taking the time, Aiseborn.
Yeah, I feel like I couldn't get to ask you that many questions, though.
Well, maybe the next time. And so for all of you out there, thanks for tuning in, and please do not forget to subscribe. Thank you.